Some lives unfold loudly, filled with movement and constant conversation. Others move quietly, almost invisibly, shaped by routines that rarely change. Aika's life belonged firmly to the second kind. She lived alone in a modest home, kept her schedule predictable, and valued the calm that came from knowing exactly how each day would pass. Aika had grown accustomed to relying on herself. Privacy became more than a preference. It became a habit. She spoke politely with coworkers, exchanged brief greetings with neighbors, and then returned to her own world. Conversations rarely went deeper than necessary, not because she disliked people, but because opening herself felt unfamiliar. Aika wants to become a professional model, a dream she has cherished for many years. Not for attention or recognition, but because modeling to her was a form of expression. She practiced endlessly, studied photographs late into the night, and submitted applications whenever she could. Progress was slow, but persistence had become part of her identity. Everything seemed predictable until the day. Aika noticed it through her window first. Boxes, furniture, and a man she had never seen before, moving back and forth with an easy energy. New neighbors were not uncommon, and normally she would have observed quietly and thought little of it. But this time was different. Within hours, there was a gentle knock at her door. Standing there was Jinji. He introduced himself with a relaxed smile, holding a small gift wrapped simply but thoughtfully. He explained that he had just moved in and wanted to greet his neighbors properly. There was nothing intrusive about his presence. His tone was calm, respectful, and unhurried, as though he understood that first impressions mattered. Aika hesitated for a brief moment. Meeting strangers was never easy for her, especially without preparation. Still, there was something disarming about the gesture. It felt sincere, not forced. She accepted the gift and returned his greeting, surprised by herself when she invited him in for tea. Perhaps it was politeness, or perhaps it was curiosity, but the door remained open.
お茶でもいかがですか？どうぞ。
Their conversation unfolded slowly. It began with ordinary topics moving, the neighborhood, the rhythm of daily life. Jinji spoke easily, but he never dominated the exchange. He listened carefully, responding with interest rather than assumption. For Aika, this felt different. She wasn't being rushed or evaluated. She was simply being heard. As the tea cooled between them, Jinji mentioned his work. He was a professional photographer, not a hobbyist, not someone experimenting casually, but someone who had spent years refining his craft. Photography, he explained, was about more than images. It was about understanding people, timing, and emotion. The word photographer caught Aika's attention immediately. Without intending to, she shared her own aspiration. She spoke about modeling, about the competitions she applied for, and the difficulty of standing out in a crowded field. She admitted that despite years of effort, she often felt uncertain about whether she was truly moving forward. Jinji didn't interrupt. When she finished, he simply nodded and smiled. Then, in a tone that felt natural rather than dramatic, he offered his help. He suggested they do a few photo shoots together, not as a favor and not as a promise of success, but as a chance to create strong, honest work that reflected who she was. The offer surprised her, not because it was extravagant, but because it was practical. It addressed a real need she had struggled with alone for years. After a moment of consideration, she agreed. first shoot was simple. No elaborate setups, no pressure. Just natural light, careful direction, and a growing sense of trust. Jinji guided her patiently, encouraging subtle adjustments rather than dramatic poses. For the first time, Aika felt seen not as someone trying to become a model, but as someone who already had something to offer.
お疲れ様。ちょっとお茶入れてくるね、俺。
ありがとうございます。
Days turned into weeks. Each session built upon the last. Their collaboration became smoother, their communication more intuitive. Neighbors began to notice the quiet rhythm between them, the way they worked together with ease. From the outside, it might have looked like the beginning of something romantic. But inside, what was forming was something more subtle. It was a partnership built on respect, shared goals, and mutual growth. And without realizing it, Aika's carefully guarded world had begun to expand, one honest connection at a time. The work between Aika and Jinji settled into a steady rhythm that felt almost effortless. There was no grand announcement that things had changed, no dramatic turning point. Instead, progress arrived quietly, in the form of early mornings, carefully planned shoots, and long walks home where conversation flowed more freely than before. For Aika, this routine became something she looked forward to, not because it disrupted her private life, but because it fit into it naturally. Each photo shoot brought new confidence. Jinji never pushed her to become someone she wasn't. He encouraged her to focus on subtle expressions, natural movement, and emotional honesty. He explained how a photograph could tell a story without exaggeration, and how authenticity often carried more power than perfection. These lessons extended beyond the camera. Aika began to apply the same mindset to her daily life, learning to trust her instincts rather than constantly questioning herself. Slowly, others started to notice the change. Her posture grew more assured. Her presence felt steadier. Even small interactions, like greeting neighbors or speaking with acquaintances, no longer felt as draining. She was still reserved, but no longer withdrawn. The work she and Jinji created reflected this transformation. Each image captured a version of Aika that felt real, grounded, and quietly confident. They began submitting the photographs to professional competitions and agencies. Waiting for responses was never easy, but Jinji reminded her that every submission was progress, regardless of the outcome. Rejection, he explained, was not a judgment of worth, but part of a longer process. Hearing this from someone who had navigated a creative career himself gave his words weight. Their conversations deepened. Aika listened closely. For the first time, she felt she was learning from someone who understood both the challenges and the rewards of persistence. The neighborhood became a quiet backdrop to their growing connection. Simple moments began to feel meaningful. It would have been easy to assume that this was becoming a romantic story, but neither of them rushed to define it. What mattered most was the work and the mutual respect that surrounded it. Jinji treated Aika not as a project, but as a collaborator. He valued her opinions, invited her input, and adjusted his approach based on her comfort. This balance allowed trust to deepen without pressure. For Aika, this was new territory. She had never experienced a relationship of any kind that felt so balanced. As more responses arrived from agencies, invitations to auditions followed, meetings were scheduled. Aika felt the familiar tension between hope and fear, the quiet question of whether she was truly ready. Jinji remained steady throughout. He encouraged preparation, reminded her to stay grounded, and emphasized that success did not require abandoning who she was. His presence became a source of reassurance, not because he promised outcomes, but because he respected the journey. After reviewing a particularly strong set of photos, Aika realized something had changed within her. She was no longer chasing approval. She was presenting herself with confidence, trusting that the right opportunities would recognize her value. As they sat together, discussing plans and possibilities, there was an unspoken feeling that they were approaching a turning point, not defined by romance or expectation, but by growth. Whatever came next, it would be shaped by the foundation they had built through patience, dedication, and the quiet strength of a partnership rooted in mutual respect.
すごく楽しかったです。
それならよかった。
After years of effort, uncertainty, and patient work, the opportunity she had been preparing for was finally real. Throughout it all, Jinji remained nearby, not as someone guiding her every step, but as a steady presence she could rely on. His support was consistent, quiet, and grounded in respect. As Aika's schedule grew busier, their time together naturally shifted. Shoots became less frequent. Conversations shortened, not because of distance or conflict, but because life was moving forward. There was no tension in the adjustment, only understanding. Both of them recognized that growth often requires room. When Aika was officially accepted as a professional model, around the same time, another chapter of her life became clearer. Aika chose to build a future with someone she loved, committing to a partnership that reflected the stability and trust she had come to value. Her marriage was not a sudden shift, but a thoughtful decision shaped by growth and self-awareness. It was a choice made with confidence, not hesitation. When she shared the news with Jinji, the conversation was simple and sincere. There was no awkwardness, no sense of loss. He congratulated her genuinely, recognizing the significance of both milestones. In that moment, it became clear that what connected them had never been about expectation or obligation. It had always been about support. Aika moved forward in her career and personal life with clarity and balance. Jinji continued his work as a photographer, refining his craft, pursuing projects that aligned with his values. They remained neighbors, occasionally crossing paths, sharing brief conversations, and exchanging updates with warmth and familiarity. What endured between them was not a story of missed chances, but one of mutual respect. They had played important roles in each other's growth, without needing to define their connection as anything more than it was. Looking back, it was easy to see how their time together had shaped them both. Not through dramatic moments or emotional conflict, but through consistency, encouragement, and trust. Their story had taken an unexpected turn, not away from happiness, but toward a broader understanding of it. And in that quiet realization, both Aika and Jinji found something lasting, a sense of fulfillment rooted not in what might have been, but in what truly was. Life continued, as it always does. New challenges emerged, new goals formed, and new routines took shape. But beneath it all was a shared understanding that growth is rarely loud. There was no bitterness, no sense of loss, only gratitude, quiet joy, and the knowledge that sometimes the most meaningful stories are the ones that teach us how to let go with grace. Not every connection is meant to last forever, but every meaningful connection can teach us something valuable. Growth often comes from support, patience, and mutual respect, rather than dramatic outcomes. When we honor each other's journeys without expectation, we create space for lasting confidence, healthy relationships, and genuine happiness, both for ourselves and for those who walk alongside us, even if only for a season.
佐川さん。
あ、お引っ越しされるんですよね。お子さんも、おめでとうございます。
ありがとうございます。
あ、そうだ。記念に写真撮りませんか？
はい、いいですよ、そんなの。
ええ、そんな遠慮しないで。ね、いいからいいから。撮りましょう。はい。じゃあ笑ってください。はい。いい顔だ。はい。もう一丁。はい、行くよ。はい。
If this story resonated with you, take a moment to reflect on the people who have helped you grow along the way. Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring and thoughtful stories that celebrate personal growth, healthy relationships, and positive life values.